Good evening, everyone. This is Antoinette. We're going to be going live in a few minutes. I just want to get everything set up, so give me that time, please. And then once I start sharing, I need to go ahead and share it on Facebook so everybody can get it, and then I can go into my PowerPoint presentation. So let's take that time to get set up because I know so many people want to hear this about this presentation. Okay, it's live Facebook. All right. Good evening, everybody. I know that some people are just coming in and I want to give you enough time to come in. I'm sorry I can't answer all your questions. I want to say that from the beginning because I have no one else to go into the comment room and to read the questions to me because I don't want to divide my attention in all those different areas. I just want to share this information with you and teach you what I know, what I have learned. Cut my phone off so I won't get distracted. Peonage. When did slavery in the United States end? When did slavery in the United States end? I want to talk to you this afternoon about some of my discoveries and my genealogy research and how I got to learn more about a subject I didn't learn in school, peonage, involuntary servitude, modern day slavery. No one talked about that in any of the classrooms that I ever attended. I didn't really hear too many people in the family talking about sharecropping. You hear them say we picked the cotton. Yeah, maybe we were sharecroppers, but they don't really go into the details about the life other than it was hard work. And at the end of the year, we couldn't, my parents or our family was always told, you'll do better next time, but not this time. You didn't come out too well. The definition of peonage, the system by which debtors or legal prisoners are held in servitude to labor for their creditors or for a person who leased their services for the state, involuntary servitude, legal servitude to pay off a debt forbidden by the 13th Amendment to the United States. Now, I know when people think about the cases of peonage, I want to talk about how surprised I was to find that there was peonage practices in 16 states that my research revealed. Now, there could have been others, but as far as the documents that I discovered and unearthed in my research, I found 16 states in the US. What was the 16 states? Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Kansas, Virginia, Arizona, New York, Georgia, Illinois, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Tennessee. The three states that I have really looked into the peonage practices, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, especially Louisiana, Mississippi, because I live in Louisiana, borderline to Mississippi, and tracing my family history would take me to especially Louisiana, Mississippi. Here are some of the plantations, and especially this one, if you can see my crutches there. That plantation, that little home was just moved, that little sharecropper's home onto this location here. But I had to travel down many, many, many dark roads, sometimes dark roads, but certainly lonely, isolated roads to do this type of research. Now, I want to point out to you that I started researching my family history in 1992. And it was in 1992 when I started to research my own family history, wanting to know more about my family history, sometimes not really knowing what you're going to come across or what you will find. But when you start looking in your own family history, you don't ever know what you will unearth in search of your own family history. What type of cases did I find? FBI cases, Department of Justice files, the NAACP cases, the Attorney General files, letters from private citizens, and letters from elected officials located at the National Archives. This is where I was able to find those records as it relates to the subjects that we'll be talking about. Here's the fun part, not so fun. This is the boxes, record group 60, that I had to look through for the Peonage cases. Now, there was not an index that guided me to look at a specific subject. I just had to take the box, open up the box, and there's a file in each one of those boxes, files, should I say, many files, several files. And I had to look in each one of those files, one file at a time, one box at a time, and it can take time. In my findings, and this is what I want to talk about in my findings, I have met many people who talked about their life as peons, sharecroppers. Some people was afraid to talk about it. Someone like May Louise Miller Walls Millers, she was not afraid to talk about it. Neither was her brother, her two brothers, and one of her brothers is still living. But this particular record that you're looking at, I was on a plantation called Ball Ground Plantation, and I'm sitting at the desk looking at records. I'm looking into some of the records of the plantation. If you haven't seen the video clip on Vice, I would suggest that you look at the documentary entitled Slavery Detective of the South. And it will talk about Ball Ground Plantation. And Ball Ground Plantation is in Warren County, Mississippi. I met Donald several years ago, and I spent about 3 to 4 years talking to Donald, his mother, Carson, the owner of the plantation, and talking to others who have lived on that plantation for 5 years. 5 generations. Where am I getting 5 years from? 5 generations. That's how long Donald Jeffrey and his family lived on that plantation for 5 generations. Earlier, we talked about documents and letters. I want to share with you, this is a letter from Governor Earl Brewer. The letter was written on April the 8th, 1915. And he was writing to Hans C.R. Lee, U.S. District Attorney. And if you can read the letter, he's telling him that I'm handing you a letter from a darky, which is rather difficult to read, but which refers to the forced detention of a family on the plantation of Mr. Sel Jones, or near Sharkey, Mississippi. I will state that within the past month, at least 5 Negroes have been to me with pitiful tales as the way they have been beaten up, and the statement that they made to flee for their life, leaving their families on this place. One of them was caught. It looks as if Peonage practices on this place to be quite extent. If your department could make an investigation, I believe you would unearth a bad condition there. I know it is a difficult matter to get evidence, in which case that you would do all in your power. I am confident. Now, this is at that time, the governor writing to the U.S. District Attorney in Jackson, Mississippi, asking for an investigation. Well, 5 people came into his office pleading. And sometimes people came in on their behalf, and sometimes they went themselves. But it was a good thing that the governor at that time called for an investigation into those practices. And it also stated the plantation of a Mr. Sel Jones. Now, if you look at this letter, it's dated 1915. We're not talking 1865, 1863. We're talking about 1915. I want to bring your attention to a letter from the NAACP. This letter was written to Hans G. Sargent, Attorney General of Justice, Washington, D.C., Department of Justice, I'm sorry, February the 9th, 1927. And the letter is saying, "Dear sir, we are in the receipt of a letter charging peonage practice in Atala County, Mississippi." When I think about Atala County, Mississippi, I think about the childhood home of Oprah Winfrey, because this is the county that her family lived in Kosciuszko. The letter names the justice of the peace as Kosciuszko and the constable Sheriff Terrell as being in a conspiracy to arrest colored as well as white people on trumped up charges, fines imposed, and it is alleged being paid by a sawmill and logging camp at Zamba. So the sawmill and the logging camp was paying the fines to get the men to work at their company. Also in Atala County, which holds the prisoners forever until they decide to let them go. The letter further charged that Stevenson, Mississippi is said to be the worst, quote, convict camp in the South, the worst. It is charged in our correspondent letter that the books of the Justice of Peace at Kosciuszko, Mississippi, show that every Negro who had been before him had been given heavy fines. So they're looking in his books, they're looking in his records to see what kind of fines that he was placing upon these people. Peonage is furthermore alleged to exist on the plantations of J.W. Cottrell and Sheriff Glass at Clarksdale, Mississippi, also in plantations in Coahoma County. I am enclosing the letter containing these charges for your information and such action as you feel this matter warrants. So if you look at this letter, and it was received, I think it was James Weldon Johnson was the secretary of the NAACP at that time. I'm just looking for another date. It was received by the Criminal Division in 1927. Let's go further. Let's look at the Civil Rights Division. And this letter here, 1965, the 5th month, the 26th, 1965, Columbus, Mississippi. And there's a Vergus Jones. And this document says that unknown victim alleged subject, a white man treated as Negro, helping Columbus, Mississippi like slaves. 1965. In the height of the civil rights movement, we were still dealing with slavery cases. George and Willie Muse. I want to bring your attention to this particular record because these two brothers, at first I thought they was twins, and I learned it wasn't twins. And I did talk to one of their family members who quoted that they hated to be called Iko and Iko, like they referred to them as the albino Negroes. And in this particular document, they was between 40 and 50 years of age, yellow color, kinky as any Negro. Wow. And they had been in the circus from the ages of about 6 and 7. The two Negro boys was kidnapped by the circus. Now, that's what I really want to point out, that the circus was going around kidnapping people of interest to them and forced them to live in these conditions for the purpose of entertainment. It was really a bad system there. And sleeping quarters while on location are as lousy show wagon. Thousands of bed bugs in their bed, possibly body lice. To have money, they were forced to carry water and to do other shows, show people's flunky work. That's what it is. I'm sorry, Your Honor. The writings are small, including doing showman a washing, and they use this money to buy their clothing. This is really sad, but these are the kind of cases I have unearthed, and sometimes it's not easy reading all these documents of pain and things that we wasn't taught. This is the information that we wasn't taught in school. And it was only through my genealogy research that I was able to learn about the subject by talking to people who wanted to share their life experience with me. You know, when I started researching my family history, my family was enslaved. So I really want to trace my family as far as back as I can possibly get. But in the process of all of that, I had to move around the community and talk to people about their experience and if they had the same last name. And when they started to tell me we just got out of slavery, it was really hard to believe, but I believed it because I've heard it from too many people at that point. Okay. What I do want to talk about, I just want to end that just a little bit. What I do want to talk about here, let me just close this on a minute, is the importance of doing your own family history, because you don't know, when you shake that tree, you don't know what you're going to find when you shake that tree. When I started researching about family history, I couldn't even imagine talking to people like May, talking to people like Johnny Lee Gaddy, Jesse Coleman, the people in the river parishes, and listening to their pain and their suffering as it relates to the sharecropping period. Now, when my family was emancipated, they became sharecroppers, but they didn't get caught up in that system. They was able to purchase their land and work their own land, be self-sufficient as much as they possibly can, because they knew that land meant freedom. They knew that if they didn't own land, they would have to become a sharecropper. And when you think about during this time, they couldn't read, they couldn't write, whatever the plantation owner said, or the planter or the farmer, that's exactly what they was going to do. You couldn't get away. Like May and them had to run, they had to take their freedom. Most people had to move in the middle of the night. And I have read some really painful records that in my 25 years of research, it's still hard to read some of the records because the pain, the murders, the lynchings, the killings, it was just a little bit, it wasn't a little bit, it was a lot. It was just too much for one person to consume in their mind. That here it is, we all thought that slavery was emancipated, and we're hearing these people say, I didn't get my freedom to 1860 to 1963. I didn't get my freedom to 1923, 1943. That's exactly what these documents will show you. Now, while Galveston, Texas is celebrating Juneteenth, May's family would say, my celebration is 1963. Another family would say, my freedom was 1943, 1923. And almost everyone who I talked to was afraid to talk. Now, some people asked me not to go public with their story because they was afraid of what may happen to them, because some people still lived in those communities. Some of them was employed by people with the same surname. A lot of the sheriffs, a lot of the judges, a lot of the people in those small communities like that are still politically empowered. They are the ones that people have to work for, and they just did not want to, they didn't want to lose their jobs. They didn't want to have their families harassed. They was just afraid. They was just afraid. but it was May Louise Wall Miller. She said to me, what else could they do to me? They have done it all. The worst experiences that any person could experience, May did. You know, she talked about the rape when she was a little girl, her and her mother being raped at the same time. She talked about the struggles. She talked about everything that she had experienced. So I would like to pull up something. If you haven't seen it, I'm just going to go. Pull this up a little bit. Because most people don't like to talk about it, but when you find someone like me that would talk about it, you have to record them, you have to spend time getting their stories. Just gonna wait till it come up, pull up getting their stories. Okay, let's see here. My internet is a little slow today. Let's try it again. I wish I could answer your questions. I'm gonna attempt to do that right now. If you give me, because I don't know what's happening with the internet. It's a little slow, but we're gonna get it right. I think it came up. Just in case you have any questions. Okay, I have the chat room open. I'm reading your comments right now. I can believe that it's bad. Greetings, everyone. Okay. If you have any questions, I can entertain questions now. I can, if you have any questions that you would like to ask me about these documents, but in the meantime, I'm gonna see if I can pull up this other information. Just about that. And then we'll come up. I just want to show you a little clipping of
We're currently in Louisiana, about to meet Antoinette Harrell, who specializes in finding cases of essentially modern day slavery. We're really deep in the South right now. It's super swampy and super rural.
I just
I
want to
was
show
actually
you
born in Boston and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, like early on in my childhood, but I've never been out this far deep into Louisiana. I'm very interested in connecting with Antoinette and learning more about her work. We're currently in Louisiana, about to meet Antoinette Harrell.
Hello, Antoinette. Nice to meet you.
FBI reports or recorded testimonies, and sometimes she just gets a phone call.
I got scared because I seen how they beat some of the boys. They beat people to death in there.
Mike, I appreciate you not taking this story to the grave with you. I know it hurt. I know it's very painful. And the state of Florida can't pay you all enough, but I'll be in touch with you shortly.
A few of Antoinette's investigations have been used in court cases for reparations, though sometimes the end goal is simply to give people knowledge of their family roots, which for a lot of Black Southerners is something that slavery erased.
Let me first tell you how I got started with this. Researching my own family history. My family was held as slaves. Well, in 1863, my family was emancipated, and my family did become sharecroppers. Robert Harrell became a sharecropper under the system of sharecropping. The planter and the newly freed former slaves came into an agreement. I will furnish you with the seeds, with the land, a place to stay. In return, you would give me a portion of the crops. Well, not everyone did the right thing.
Although sharecropping was technically legal, the practice was widely abused by white landowners who used debts to keep African Americans tied to the land that they once worked as slaves. Sharecroppers didn't pay rent, but they didn't own any property. And today, historians agree sharecropping was just slavery by a different name.
So many former enslaved Africans had nothing. They had no choice. At the end of the year, you owe me. No matter how hard you work, you were told, sorry.
And those cases relate directly to your cases today.
Right, after slavery. These are like 1921, 1930, 1940s to 50s, and some of them to the 60s.
Antoinette's very first case was Mae Louise Miller, a woman who was held as a slave with her entire family in Mississippi until 1961. Though Mae passed away in 2014, Antoinette took us to see one of her brothers, Arthur Miller.
Mae and Arthur being two of the older sisters and brothers, they remember a lot. It took a long time before Arthur really opened up and talked.
We lived on, I don't know what would you call it, but something like a plantation to me. It belonged to several different white people. They all were family, I guess. And you couldn't leave. And if you did leave, they either come get you or have somebody kill you, whatever. That's what happened. They did my mama bad.
What did they do to your mother?
They just had my mother, the white men. They just do what they wanted to do with her. And I just wasn't big enough to do that. If I would have been, I don't know, probably would be.
And this was in the 1950s or 40s?
That was on through the 40s and the 50s, all through the 50s, and 40s, 60s.
So what would the repercussions be if you tried to leave or if you tried to refuse what they wanted?
Back in them days, it was kind of like you had to do what the white man said or get killed. My daddy's uncle, he made him dig a grave and kill him. They killed him, buried him in his own grave. Jerry Dawson, they killed him. He lived around the same place we lived on. He left and said he wasn't coming back. They wouldn't guide him, brought him back, carried him right down there from his house, killed him, hung him up in a tree.
They hung him?
They killed him first, castorized him, and hung him up right from his house where his children, everybody could see him.
Were you aware that this is 1940s, 1950s, that this is insane.
If you want to
Arthur,
follow
this
that,
is-
let me
this
just
is-
go ahead and,
It breaks my heart.
yeah. If you want to follow that, you can go to Slavery Detective the South and you can finish hearing Arthur's interview. But sometimes it's very difficult to talk about. It really is. I mean, it's difficult for me as a researcher. So I know someone who lived through it. I can't even imagine. So I just want to open up so I can get, if there's any questions, I do want to be able to answer some of the questions that you all may have for me on this subject. 1 minute. Hearing Arthur's interview. But sometimes it's very difficult to talk about. All right, is that just reading? I would like to know if there's anything that we can do to help so I know them, us now. Live through it. Yes, there's a lot that we can do. Imagine. So I just want to first of all, so I can get if there's any questions. Let me just. It's so hard, everybody, when you're trying to do everything at one time, and I'm getting distracted because I am trying to answer your questions too, because it is very crucial that we talk about slavery not just happening in being abolished in 1865, but we need to talk about slavery for the Wall family, and not just the Wall family. It's not an isolated family. It's hundreds of thousands of families that was held in this type of bondage. So I just want to say to you that Mae is not, her family wasn't the only family, but Mae was brave enough to speak about it. That's the difference here. She didn't mind talking about it. So I'm just trying to see if there's any more questions. Yes, she didn't mind talking about what they went through. She wasn't afraid That's what it was. May wasn't afraid. She stopped being afraid because she had been beat enough. She had been raped. She couldn't even have children. It was difficult for her to wear shoes. It was just, you can't even imagine, unless you're in that situation, not having enough food to eat, don't know what you're going to eat today. That's what it was like for her. And May, I felt like, for the most part, there was not enough Black colleges that spend time talking to May and hearing it from the people in the first person, which is them. I'm sitting here telling you what May said, and I'm sitting here telling you what most people like that went through. Yes, I spent years recording them. I spent years asking questions, just want to hear every little single thing they had to say. And sometimes that meant having them to go back and visit that pain all over again. Yeah. When some of them that went through that, they worked so hard to try to put it behind them, but the scars that they wrote, the memories and the damages, listen to Arthur talk about, what he went through. I looked up that name, Jerry Dawson. I did the research, and you can see that, yes, something happened to him. Arthur's and May's father, I spent some time with him. He was 107 when I met him. And his mind was very sound and sharp. He called names. They called names. They called places that this happened to them. Almost every person that I have interviewed in my Peonage research, they know the names, they know the places, they know the people. But that doesn't make them any less afraid to talk about it. Just checking to see questions. So if I get quiet, it's because I'm reading. Yes, I know we all can get angry and be upset about things that happen in our history, but what you can do is to direct that anger in a positive way, to do something, to help educate people on the subject of peonage and involuntary servitude. May's story was not the only one. The stories I've heard from people, it's enough to make any person somewhat lose their mind, because you couldn't even imagine people doing these things to people. I don't think no one can make these things up. Nobody, it's just too far fetched. It's too far out there. One document I recall reading is the document where these boys was being disposed of. That was the word they used to. We're going to dispose of the children. And if I look away, it's because I'm thinking it's coming back. It's all coming back to me. He said, we are sending these boys over to Clarksdale to dispose of them. This was happening in Simpson and Smith County, Mississippi. And they said, to dispose of them, what do you mean? How do you dispose of a human being? But they was actually disposing of the boys. When I first started doing this research, there was no one else really. There was a book by Pete Daniels, The Shadows of Slavery, I think it is. And then there was a couple of other books, Lay This Body Down, which is a very difficult book to read because the pain is so dark. And it was research that you didn't find this type of research in the universities. You didn't find it in the classroom. You just didn't find the conversations as much as you would have thought that this many people in slavery, held in slavery, why no one is talking about it? Why no one is talking about the rising tide of Mississippi in 1927, when a lot of people was forced back at gunpoint on these plantations. Now, remember, people say, oh, I would have ran, I would have did this. I took a ride down those lonely roads. And when I tell you, a lot of those white landowners, they own large tracts of land. Large tracts of land. Where was they going to run to? Who was they going to run to? That's what most people said, the people I interviewed, who am I going to tell? I don't want to tell you, but you're asking these questions. So I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to tell it because you're asking, but not because I want to talk about it. This is not something that people want to talk about. It's too painful. You know, it's too painful to talk about a time in your period where a child 7 years old was raped and your mother was raped at the same time, or, you watch your father being beat, your daughter is being raped in 1945 and nothing you can do about it. If somebody come and take one of your children, nothing you can do about it. But we have to go back and study peonage, involuntary servitude, and modern day slavery. So I just want to say to everyone, yes, this is real. I know you're going to see that movie, Alice, and that movie is about a young lady who found out that she was free in 1970. The index told me at the National Archives, the last case was filed in 1973. Yes, 1973. There was hundreds of thousands of African Americans. Now, African Americans was the largest percentage of the nationality of people, but there was poor whites, Hungarians, Choctaw Indians, Mexicans, Italians. I found Polish people, and most of the Italians came through. There was Florida, it was Mary Quackenbos who was really studying their cases and documenting these cases. But there is hundreds of cases, thousands of cases, thousands upon thousands of cases of that was documented. Now, if it was documented with the FBI, Department of Justice, attorney generals, private citizens, the NAACP was investigating these cases. It's more cases than what you realize. I just hope that I would be able to continue building what needs to be built to tell these stories. The platform is needed. I am into 30 years, little short of 30 years of research in this area. And so we're working on many things right now to educate people on the subject of peonage, the subject of involuntary servitude. What does that mean? And you couldn't imagine living on a plantation and you're working from sun up to sundown, can't see, hoping that by the end of the year, you and your family who have worked so hard to put those nickels and dimes together can leave the plantation, and you're told you can't leave. You can't leave. You owe me this time. If you work just a little bit harder next time, then you would come out ahead and we'll break even. But for most people, they wouldn't have dared challenge the store owners, the plantation owners, the sheriff, the judge. They would not have done it. So I just wanted to share with you some of the documents that I found, and you can go to my website at www.peonage.detective.com, and you will see some more cases there about peonage. One case that comes to mind that I want to share with you is a case where this mother had to leave and try to go in and get help for her children. And she wanted her children off that plantation. He was beating them every day, and she left. And he had beat her already with a crowbar and anything to get his hands on. He beat her. So she went back and tried to get her children, and she never got her children. Even taking somebody white with her, to try and speak up on our behalf. Another case that I came across is this woman was being tied up to the bedpost with a trace chain around her neck. And when her husband or her live-in partner got away and when he got the sheriff and brought him back to the house. And what he said to the sheriff, he had a gun and he was waving a pistol around. And the sheriff told him, look, you need to put the gun away. So he put the gun away. And the sheriff said, what are you doing? He said, he's got the son of a bees keep running away. He said, well, you can't do that. He let her go. He unlocked the chain from around her neck, tied to the bedpost. She went by her mother. And the next day he went back and he got her and brought her back. So an author said that if you get away and they come and get you, they're either going to punish you by beating you or you can possibly be killed. And author meant every word that he said. Because I have seen that in the reports that people, some people was murdered. Some people was beat. And when they put the fright in one person, that was supposed to be for everybody to see what was done. Because if you have any idea or think that you're going to run away, then this is exactly what can happen to you. So that power of fear was there. Not just for themselves, because I believe that if a person just had themselves, they probably would say, dead, in my dead bed, I'm free. I'm free from all this. You can only kill me one time. But to live as a slave for the rest of my life, they thought about their children. They thought about their families, because that's exactly what made them thought about the family, the family. And that's all you ever hear from all of them. That's all I've ever heard. Mama was still there. My family was still there when you ask them why they didn't run away. Another story that sat on my desk for 20 years, a man and his family that was sold for $20. A family of 5 people, kidnapped and sold in 1926. Yes, it's enough to make you feel numb sometimes. And it's very difficult to explain what that feeling feel like. It's just numb. It's just make you sit there and think about the place you live in and with whom you live around and live with. One human being can do this to another human being. So while we celebrate Juneteenth, 1865 for Galveston, Texas, I celebrate May and her family, 1963. I celebrate the other families, 1923, 1914, 1940, 1950, 1956. It reminds me somehow of some of us, 1863 meant something to us, 1865. But it reminds me of others coming out the fields and saying, yeah, oh my God, we finally got our freedom. We're free, we're free, we're free. What year is this? This is 1975. What are you talking about? You're free. This is 1953. What are you talking about? Free. Slavery been over. Been over for who? For who? For who? Not for me. Not for me and my family. No. 1960. Yeah, that's what some can say. And I know It's something that many people do not want to talk about. I know it's something that many people probably say, how could this be? You know, I went to school, I majored in history. No one talked about this. How could this be? It happened. I've shown you evidence, documents. I've been pounding the pavement for 25 to 30 years, pounding and pounding and saying, look, you all, as Harriet Tubman said, you know, I could have freed more if they just would have realized they was free. They were slaves. I'm saying to everybody out there, y'all, look, everybody didn't get their freedom at the same time. There was some that came much later. Listen. Okay, so what are you saying? We don't need to wait till everybody who experienced that die off. We don't need that. We need people to feel that they have someone that they can talk to, that we are listening. We are. I think about my own mortality and all of this. And I'm saying, I don't want to take all of this with me when my time should come. I want to leave it so that we can study and change the course of the way things are, you know. When people around the state is talking about critical race theories, and it's another way of trying to silence history. There's an old African proverb that says, not to know is bad, but not to want to know is worse. Yeah, that's the one. Not to want to know. How could you not want to know? It happened in my lifetime. So I take it personal. Because I was told that slavery was abolished. That's what I was told. I was told that in school that Abraham Lincoln freed the enslaved. That's what I was told. And like most people that is in school, that's what you believe until you start seeking your own family history and people start to talk to you. The Mays start to talk. The Johnny Lee Gaddy start to talk. The Jesse Coleman start to talk because they know you are listening. You're going to listen to them. You're going to listen. Somebody want to hear. Somebody want to hear this. No, I'm not telling it in a movie. I'm telling it in first person. I'm telling it as real as it can get. You know, this is the true reality. It's not a made up. They're not making this up. We need your help. We need your help to spread this word like anything else. This is not entertainment. This is not entertainment. People dying and suffering is not entertainment. Being held as slaves when slavery was supposed to be abolished is not entertainment. Those records at the National Archives is not entertainment. Some records in courthouses, in those attics, is not entertainment. And some people try to, you know, well, why they've been free, but, you know, all these programs, and why they just can't pull themselves up by the boot, by the string of their boot, because, you know, some people didn't get their freedom until 1960, 1960, that's the year I was born. Yeah. So I have given you the documents, and before closing, I am going to see if there's any more questions out there that you would like to ask me before we close out. Thank you. I would like for you all to please help get this word out. Yes, this is not entertainment. And we can't take it as a movie. We're going to take it as real life. Does all of this knowledge you make, does all this knowledge make you completely distrustful of the white people around you in Louisiana? Not exactly, because there are some people that help you, white people that help you find the truth. No. And if I did that, I don't build walls like that around myself, because there are people that is white that helps me. No, no. There's many white people, they are just as disgusted as anybody else sometimes in what their family have done. Why you think they're trying to, some of them are trying to dismiss the history that's being taught? No. So to answer your question, no. Let me see if there's any other questions. All right. What help do you need, if any? Good question. Why don't I inbox you my information and we can talk about that, because there's a lot of help that's needed. A lot of these young people who have these platforms like TikTok and, Instagram and stuff, I don't have time to sit there and to nurse those type of sites, because I'm busy researching, documenting, and different things I'm doing. So if there's someone else that can do that, that would be very helpful. I just don't want to be told in some type of movie way, but I'm grateful for the movie, because the movie is going to open up the conversations about this research. It's going to open up that dialogue and the conversation about the research. So yes, there's something that everybody can do. Everybody have a responsibility. Black and white have a responsibility, so that we can learn from the past. It's the past that shapes the present, and the present that shapes the future. We must never forget that. Never forget that. We are in this situation sometime because we don't, like some people say, oh, that's a long time ago. Leave that alone. That's in the past, but it's the past that's affecting the present. And they tell people, get over it. How do you get over? It's like, follow me here for a minute before closing. It's like being raped by someone, male or female. It doesn't matter. And they tell you, the victim, just go take a shower and get over it. Live your life. What those that was enslaved in the 20th century went through, please don't tell them to get over it. Don't tell anybody who was enslaved to get over it. Because as a genealogist, reading and still searching for my own family members and finding those that was enslaved and finding the inventory of the chattel property, still looking for family members in 2022, I'm still searching for family members that was sold away on some auction block or some deal or another. I'm still processing the stud who fathered 50 children in a community, in a small community. And the only thing that they can say is my great-great-great-grandfather who was enslaved was a stud. Most of the children in this community is his. And get over it. What the mark that this leaves up on us is really a mark that I'm searching for this paper. I thought I had it just on the top of my desk. I think I put my hands on it. Yes. Let me just read the slave narrative to you. This is the slave marriage. One boy was, no, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong thing. One boy was traded off from his mother when he was young. And after he was grown, he was sold back to the master. He married to his own mother. How she found out this was her son She had struck him in the head accidentally. And after they married, she looked in his head and saw the scar and asked him why it was there. He began to tell her, and she fainted because it was her own son, Wesley Burrell. It's a lot to behold, a lot to digest. Just, there's no way someone who's researching and processing and you're reading every word for word, and you're thinking about the document as you read it, you're saying, is this right? Am I reading this correctly? And you have to put yourself in that place because you don't went back now, because you're there. That letter is in you now. You're reading it. You're thinking about that. You're thinking about that pain and that suffering. You're looking at all of that. That's exactly why people don't want to go back sometimes. But I chose to go back. Now help me to go forward by talking about these words, involuntary servitude and peonage practices. I want to thank everyone for joining me. I will keep you abreast of it if I decide when I will have time to do more videos about this. But once again, please help me to spread the truth about peonage practices. And if the movie comes out, when the movie comes out, because it is coming out, let's talk real talk. Let's not talk movies. Let's talk real talk. Let's talk about those that went through it, not in a theatrical way, but a true experience, a true life experience. So I want to